Hi, all our wonderful creative quilters. I'm Lizzy Allen from Thimble Thread Quilting. Quilting with me today is Jackson from the House of Jackson.
Hello everyone, today we're here sharing some tips and tricks for stress-free long arm quilting. We use these tips quite a lot and we thought we'd share them to help your creativity. So
stay tuned.
Yeah, let's get started. So starting with our first tips, we're going to be preparing the machine. So what's one of the most important things when we start a quilt, Lizzy?
Change the needle.
How many times have we accidentally forgotten to? And it looks like we've put a nail through it.
Yep, and choosing the right needle. Okay,
Yeah.
so for Bali batik fabrics, that type of thing, quilter's best friend, 4-point needle.
Yes. I've had a quilt and the batik on the back, I was stressed. I think I even phoned you. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And you said, try a ballpoint needle. Tell you what, it worked a charm. So.
Yep. The other thing is, when you look at the quilt, so these little numbers that we have on the back here that we're going to quilt for you later, it's a really light piecing. So I'm quite happy to use a 16 needle. What would you use for a heavily pieced quilt?
I'd go up a needle size.
Yeah. 20?
Yeah, just that little bit extra to actually go through that piecing and, ease that stress and all that.
It helps our machine, doesn't it?
It does. It creates less risk of breaking a needle on the bulk of the seams as well.
Exactly. So the next thing that we do is I oil the bobbin.
Yeah. I oil at every bobbin change, do you?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, awesome.
And I'm funny because we're Australian. We use the wool, right? So we're a little bit spoiled. So I like to make sure that, first of all, that I place my batting the right way up. So it's the scrim side down because I don't want a lot of lint down the bobbin case.
Yeah, because if you have the scrim on the top and then needles going through it, it's actually reversing how the batting was technically made.
Yep, and you black quilt, it looks like it's got a fuzz. But the other thing is, have you ever had it where you pulled out the bobbin case and the lint has caused a little ball on the thread and all of a sudden you think you have these big tension issues and it's the bobbin?
Yeah, so that's another important tip. Always clean your bobbin area. Every bobbin change, I like to just clean it out. At my studio, I have an air compressor and I actually just hose it out with the air because that gives me so much less hassle down the track, because if that lint gets caught in a thread and it just goes into the back of the quilt, it can be a bit of a challenge. Yeah. So you use the Candero, I believe, don't you?
Yeah, I use this. For me, it's a girl's best friend.
Yep.
Yeah, they just shake the can and I stand probably about 3 inches away from my hook assembly and I just clean it all. And I do like it for cleaning just the underside of the machine, the tracks, to make sure that, especially for those girls that have the automation, that nothing unnecessarily is going to the belt or into the carriage. So I love it. You'll get it down at your local hardware store. So do you warm up your machine?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Better safe than sorry. It just gives it helps it get the peak performance, because where I am in my studio, it can get quite cold at night. So I just start up, and where I do my tension testing on the side of my quilt, I just run the machine for a few minutes there, just doing some practice. And it also warms me up for the day as well.
So I'm going to give you a little trick on the tension. So the machine has a ballast. So when I go from left to right, it looks good. But, most people don't realise that when I go from right to left, that's when the thread's under pressure. Yeah. And that's when my snaps are going to occur. So I'm quite funny. I'll do left to right, then right to left, but I'll do like a curlicue. So I go in and then I come out of the point, because if that's where it's going to eyelash, that's where I'm going to stay.
Yeah, and curvature is the best way to find any tension issues.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the way the machine's moving, it's in multi-directions, so it really helps highlight any potential issue.
And I don't know about you, but I hate unpicking. So that thing of letting that first row start and then you're underneath going, what does it look like?
I will confess, I have quilted the whole first row of a quilt And I did have to unpick, and I tell you what, it makes me even more cautious to check my tension because I spent the next 3 hours and I'm like, ding, and I was like, I'm never doing the same mistake again, I tell you.
Nice. So, what about preparing the frame?
Well, whenever I start a quilt, I love it to be clean because, to be completely honest, there's nothing worse than a little bit of lint on your track and the machine goes along.
The bump.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, it's just so stressful. So to avoid that, I literally just clean my entire frame. And not only that, I reduce what I have sitting on the frame. So if I have little bits and pieces sitting on it and the machine's going fast and there's a little vibration, they also vibrate and they honestly do my head in. So a clean frame is a happy quilter in my studio. I don't know, is it the same here?
Yeah. So I'm lazy. I always find that when I take the quilt off at the end of the day, that's when I clean the frame. Because when I walk in the morning to start my new quilting day,
you want to get started straight away.
That's right, because that's the best bit. So I use my microfiber cloth when I'm finished and I just wipe down everything because I'm not dodging. Same thing as you.
And you do your wheels.
Yeah.
Yes, because it can often build up on the wheels and then we're like, I've cleaned my tracks. But it's the actual wheel that it can also build up on because it might be a little bit of harmless lint, but when it's got the machine going over it, it compresses it.
So what do you like to use?
As in getting the lint off?
Yeah.
A microfiber cloth and an air compressor because sometimes I just got to blow it away.
Oh, sweetie, sometimes you need a hand. I use Windex.
Really?
Yeah. So any of the grime that's actually built up, if it wants to be a little bit tough, I like Windex on the microfiber. Not sopping wet.
Just that little, just to
a
get
little
rid of
bit.
it.
Yeah.
You're full of tips, Lizzy.
Oh, well, it cures pimples too. So, how about loading the quilt?
So, one of my biggest things is I sometimes actually tear the backing fabric because it gives me that straight edge. So then I can come to my leader cloth and mark the center quite easily. And then I just put it on and do the same. I, do my pin the top one and I roll that up.
Yeah, so right, and you smooth it all out as you go?
As I'm going, yep. And then I put it on my backing roller and I roll it back and then smoothing it away. But if there's like a little crease or a crease that's, it's going to be on my last nerve, I grab a little misting bottle.
One of these?
Yeah. I tell you, it's my best friend. And I just give it just a gentle mist. And what that does is it just is enough to relax the fibers of the fabric so we can keep rolling and just roll that crease away. And it's really good because when we get to the first section, everything else is rolled up. So all those creases are being held in. They're not creased anymore. They're held in their new position. So then when I do my first section, any of those creases, they've been taken care of and they're stopped.
Yeah. So what do you do with your batting? Do you let your batting rest in the room? Yeah.
So if I've had batting come and it's been folded, I just have a spare table and I lay it over that.
Yeah.
Or I have bulldog clips in a picture frame rail and I just hang it up because there's nothing worse than that little crease. And sometimes you can do as much as you want, but letting it rest to come back to its normal form is the best way to solve that problem.
Well, I learnt the hard way. So a customer came in and I held up the quilt and the light was there and there was the original crease. And it was maybe 2 mil. And it was a pre-purchase package. I opened it and I don't know about you, if I can avoid it, always make sure that my creases run.
Yeah, because then as it's coming through the frame, if we're floating our batting, what can happen is that just gentle pressure just eases those creases out for us as well.
And, our frames are geometrically correct.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so everybody says, but how do you keep the quilt square? So the first thing that I do is I use our channel locks and I base this horizontal line.
That's my favourite thing. It's just like, and when I do that, I start in the centre.
Yep.
And I work that way. Instead of doing, tying off or, cutting off, I actually just come back along. And then I come up to here. Yep. And then I actually come back to the centre. And then I move my machine back a little bit. Like I disengage the channel lock. I move my machine back, which marks my centre. So when I put my quilt top on with the centre mark, I just align that. Okay. And then I bring the machine forward and do my sides and my top.
Yeah. Now, for the girls that are feeling a little bit stressed about basting their quilt tops down, you do know that if you put your pins in vertically and take your time very gently, you can just ease your machine over those pins. If you're not comfortable doing that,
you can always remove the pin just
before you get there.
Yep.
And do you smooth your quilt top out?
Yeah, I sometimes use like a ruler just to get that nice.
Oh no, see, these, I love these. See, look, I just smooth my surface.
You know, I've even got them in my studio. I've got the lovely pink ones.
Yeah.
And the best part is they're so easy to find. It's just like, where is it? And I just start looking for pink and I'm like, shunk.
Yeah. And you know, so there's not a right or a wrong, but lots of people like to float their quilt tops. You know, we've all done it. So we can use our quilt grip clips.
That's what I use them for. I love floating my quilts. Like if it's a smaller quilt, I could roll it up, but I simply just float it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's quite funny, the basting down the side. Now, I've seen lots of photos and people have got into trouble where the hobbing footers got caught. Do you baste down the side?
Yeah, so you showed me the wiggle one. And
yeah.
I used to just do the straight stitch, but occasionally I'd have it flip over. And then when Lizzy showed me how she does the wiggle wobbles, I was like, that's really cool. And I would do the straight bit and then do the wiggle wobble.
So you want me to show you how to do that? Okay.
Yes, please.
Now I'm going to show you what I mean by a wibble wobble up the side. Now it's really important. I always start at the bottom and go up because we've always had that quilt that it was very full borders. So in doing this, I'm basically effectively gathering it. So one of the most important things, of course, is locking off that stitching to get the perfect tension. So I always do needle up, needle down, pull my bobbin, come back, and it's really important that I actually just wiggle the machine and lock those stitches off. I like to start with the needle down. It just gives me a little bit of security.
And I'm going to show you another little trick while you're at that, Lizzy. If we grab a pin, we can actually hold our thread tails out of the way.
Yes.
So I simply slip it in the quilt top and wrap it around so it's tucked out of the way.
That's perfect. Yep, I really like that idea. Now, I like to just quilt by gently turning on my machine, and I don't have to go very fast, but when I do this, it just puts the side down. And if the surface is really, really full, I'm actually pushing the fullness to the top rather than every time I roll on, I'm pushing the fullness towards the bottom of the quilt. And it's really that easy.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, and when I go to quilt, if I'm in automation, I don't end up with edges of my quilt being turned
Flipping back. Yeah, that's what I found when I started doing it. It really stopped the quilt from flipping back on itself.
Yep, I bring the machine forward about 2 inches and then I pick up the thread, move back into position, and I literally needle up, needle down. So what that's done, it's taken off the tension off the bobbin to allow me to bring it to the top of the surface. And I just simply cut those off because they'll be buried in the binding.
Okie dokie. Now let's look at our next.
So Jackson, how many bobbin cases do you have?
I've got 2.
You got 2? Yeah, me too.
This one for pre-rounds and the others for, everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the last thing I need to do is start fussing around with the tension dial at the top. So really, 90% of what I use is a 40 weight.
Yeah.
It's really rare that I use a 60 weight. So I never play with my dial. So for me, it's all about, I want it to be fun. It's just, okay, that's my pre-round case.
And just boom, boom, away you go.
Yeah. Now, the reason we have 2 cases is because pre-rounds are what? Super fine thread. So naturally, they're just going to spool out. So we actually take the time to set the tension individually. So if I was winding a bobbin and it was just 40 weight, it's my normal case.
Yeah. With the pre-rounds, because they're a finer thread, and they're quite consistent, it's just easy to have that bobbin case separate. So it's just go, go, go. But in saying that, every time we change a bobbin, cleaning the bobbin area, oiling it, but doing a tension test just to be sure.
Always.
Guilty of it myself. I have been doing a panto in PowerPoint. I love that feature. And it was just going along and I was like, something just doesn't seem right. I stopped because I just changed the bobbin and I was like, yeah, who forgot to check the bobbin tension?
Yeah.
It happens though.
Yeah.
But if I had it tested prior, I would have avoided that mistake totally.
And you know, if you're winding your bobbins on your machine like I do, having the correct tension on those bobbins and having them wound properly is a game changer, because basically we're equalising the pressure. So we've got good tension on the bobbin, good tension on the top, and it's really fabulous. And because when you actually look, we've got the image up there. The red is the top thread and the bobbin is flatlining. So that means that my top thread needs to be tightened. But the truth is, I've got to have enough ease with the bottom tension to allow it to be pulled up into the quilt sandwich. Because what we really want to see is the middle picture.
Yes, where it nests in the middle. And the other one that can happen too is when your top thread is way too tight, you're at a higher chance of snapping the thread, but it pulls the bobbin thread to the top.
Yeah.
And it's noticeable at times and it causes a lot of stress. And it's a very simple fix. It's just ease that tension down. And you don't do it a full turn, you do it in increments.
Less is more.
Yeah, but like those little turns are how we get to that sweet spot without going past it if we were to do a whole turn.
Now, would you take the bobbin case out and put it back in and do a test first before playing with the tension?
Yes, it's so important to do that because we need to eliminate our issue. So the first thing I do is I actually check my bobbin, check I haven't run out of bobbin thread, all that stuff. And then I go, okay, the bobbin is no longer going to be an issue. It is fine. Then I look at the thread path. After the thread path, I then adjust my tension.
Yeah, and one of the things that somebody showed me many, many years ago, which was a game changer, was quilting too tight. And I was like, I don't understand what you mean. So, see, we've got this nice and it's flexible. So we don't quilt drum tight. So I see quite often the skip stitch, or the long stitch, or quite often a long stitch, if you've got needle penetration, what that actually is the top thread is so tight, it's taking about 3 revolutions for the hook to come round for there to be enough thread to pick up. So how do I know whether I'm quilting too tight? It's really easy. I pick up that top thread and I use a pair of snips and I snip the bobbin thread. And if I can do 3 to 6 stitches that it undoes, it means I'm quilting at the right tension.
And if you struggle to snip just one,
you're quilting too tight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too, it's really important when we tie on and tie off or start, we have to hold the bobbin tie, like I was showing with the pin previously. Because if we don't, and we just start the machine, it can just be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah. So it really is the most important thing is to bring that bobbin thread up. It was once said to me that birds don't need anywhere to nest on the back of our quilts.
Oh, that is so true. And speaking of nesting, when I tie on, do you use a self-toting needle?
Yeah. So on the side there, I have a fabulous little magnet, and that's where I keep my open-ended needles. So I love these because I just snap the thread on
and just slip it through. And also, I feel it makes it more durable.
Yeah, because I make sure that when I pull that through, it will be an area that I'm about to quilt.
And then it's got quilting over it to secure. Because sometimes we can snip it and it will last to an extent. But my fear is that if it gets washed one too many times, it starts unraveling. Yep. But when it's buried within the quilt, it takes a lot for it to unravel.
Have you ever checked your foot height?
Yes, that's really important because if it's too low, it can cause the most disgusting.
Let's bring the machine over and we'll show the girls. Oh, actually, we probably need it off for them to actually see. So quite often, especially if I've changed a foot or changed a needle, while I'm there, I literally put the needle in the down position and I make sure it's not on the quilt, and I use my lovely little needle alignment tool and I pop it down flat and I make sure, so the needle will be down, I pop that under and I just make sure that when I do that up, that the
And
hobbing
it's
foot.
so easy to adjust the height of the foot.
Yep.
And that's one of the things I'm just blown away by all the time.
Yeah.
And not only that, the handles. I'm a little jealous, Lizzy. Just the adjustable handles. And that's something else that's really important with long arm quilting, because like you were showing me the other day, when I'm doing ruler work, I had this a little lower and it was in my way and we could just adjust it out of the way.
Yeah, always make sure that your obstruction is out, that you feel comfortable. And you probably know that I have my frame a little bit higher and that actually stopped me from bending my back. So, yes, it'll take you a little bit of time, but I also found that ergonomically, my handles and my elbows and shoulders are really relaxed. Because you said something funny the other day about being relaxed.
Oh, yes. This is actually, so when I first started my long arm journey, I was like, if you gave me an ice cream cone, I would have smashed it into a million pieces because I was just gripping it and I was so tense. And then what was happening is because I was so tense, it was actually pulling me to the machine. But then I was like, hang on a minute, just relax. The machine moves freely enough.
Yeah, it does.
And then because I was more relaxed, I could ease the pressure I was holding with and I could still guide the machine. And because I had less tension in my body, I was more relaxed. And I tell you what, my quilting looked 10 times better after that.
Yeah.
Just relaxing and taking a breath and 30-minute breaks and stretch.
Yep. Got to do your Pilates.
And the other, how do you pick threads?
I encore them.
Yeah. So show us how we do that.
So usually if I'm using a variegated thread or a thread, if I want to test the colour, I pull them. So when I'm in pull, I'm pulling the thread. So I take the thread off and I just pull it on top of the surface to see whether it's a match.
And then you do that with the other options and then do a process of elimination.
And I do. So a camera never lies. And each and every one of us owns a mobile phone. So literally just take a quick happy snap and see whether that's for you.
Yeah, and with the variegated threads, my favourite trick is I will look at the side of it and I'm like, I just don't know about this. I look at the top.
Yes.
Because around the top of the thread
is how it looks when it's quilted.
Exactly. And since discovering that,
it's just
I've made better choices.
On the side. You do that and say, wow, that's what my thread's going to look like.
Because as you say, Liz, it's all about choices.
Okay, tell me, when you take your quilt off the frame, how do you finish it?
Well, first I feel very excited for the achievement.
Yes,
That's the joy of quilting. But aside from that, I take it out and as I'm rolling it back, I check that I haven't missed any threads to bury and all that.
Yep.
And if there's something pop up like that, I sort it then. Once I've done that, I get it out of the frame and I go to my machine with a 1mm stitch length and about 1/8 of an inch in, maybe a bit more, where the binding will cover. I actually stitch around the whole quilt and I find it just covers the quilting so it doesn't unravel.
Exactly. And it's great because when you put the binding on, it's all covered.
And then we don't have to worry about, because have you been in a situation when you're binding and you didn't do that and you're like,
yeah, I've started to see 2 or 3 stitches because it was locked off here where I started the panto. So
and then we've trimmed it away so it's not
yep.
anchored. Mm-hmm.
So I always do that. That is it's one of those things that somebody told me years ago and I was like, really, should I bother? And I tell you what,
it's worth it. There's nothing makes you cry more than when it unravels.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then the other one too is in talking about completing every section. Have you ever been rolling a quilt back and realised you've missed a section?
Yeah.
How did you go about it? Was it still connected to the take-up?
No, I have actually taken it off. It's sort of like a little bit of a Lizzy signature. And it is, especially when custom quilting, because I will do things in like I'll get into that zone, and I will say for me, because I will take the time for visibility to change the feet on the machines, because Grace really do a fabulous job with their accessories.
I love this. Even there's so many feet. I'm just like, this is just choice.
The older generation, we like the high vis. Okay, so when we have the high vis, so I will find it, even though I say to myself, yep, all the background stipple's done, and I bring it back and I go to start on something else and I think I've nailed it, I always go back. I always check. It's take the time and make the time is really, I think, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And, good practices right at the beginning can make for a much, much happier quilting experience, because...
And it elevates your confidence too.
I think it does.
Because when you've got all these tips and tricks up your sleeve, you feel more confident and comfortable, and then you're like, oh, actually, I've got this. But when you have something happen, you're like, oh.
Yeah. So I think we actually might leave it with the tips and tricks, because we're going to come back with another fun video. Because what are we doing, Jackson?
So we've got Hazel the Hedgehog by Elizabeth Hartman, and I think they're gorgeous. So I've named mine Frankie.
Mine's Hazel.
Actually, I might change it to Henry so it actually rhymes, stick with Hedgehog. But anyway, we're excited to quilt it, aren't we?
So Hazel and Henry.
Yeah.
So the challenge is we are going to do a little bit of custom work with rulers and background fills.
And play around with the awesome feet. The foot I'm really looking forward to? The micro stipple foot?
No. The 360, the wonderful.
You've got to show me that one now.
Yeah, I know. So we'll leave you there and stay tuned, and we'll be back with another video.
See you soon, guys. Don't forget